Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm wearing my Warriors t-shirt because there is a Warriors NBA Finals game tonight, and the Warriors are very misunderstood. People actually don't like the Warriors, which is mind-numbing to me, because I grew up with them, and you gotta appreciate they were like a horrible team for like 50 years, for 50 years, and then there's a lot of internet chatter about is Dr. Kalish really a Warriors fan? I'm kidding, no one cares, but let me show you. This is proof. You see, there's me, Danny Kalish, with my dad and my older sister. And you see what I'm wearing? I'm wearing a Golden State Warriors t-shirt. And this is like 1974, okay? That was so my dad used to always take me to Warriors games. This is one of our father-son things. I started taking my son to Warriors games when he was like 5 years old, and they sucked. They were horrible. They lost every game, and you could buy tickets for like 20 bucks. And so we who were Warriors fans for our entire lives love the team. I don't know, the country has kind of turned against them for some strange reason because they're so good, but we suffered for a long time. And anyhow, I believe they are going to lose the finals this year, and God bless Toronto. I hope they are happy with the win because they deserve it. They've been playing hard, but I think we're going to win tonight. Warriors going to win tonight. I think Toronto's going to win the final game. That is my prediction, if you're wondering. So, anyways, we got to keep this seminar short because the game's going to start at the top of the hour, and probably most of you are going to want to watch it as well. So tonight I wanted to talk about organic acids and the ion panel. And tonight I want to talk a little bit about some of the deeper concepts that are a little bit outside the scope of functional medicine in some ways, or a little bit outside the scope of what most functional medicine practices are all about, and look a little deeper into the idea of human health. And so, and I want to show you some slides along the lines of all this stuff here. Let me pull this up. So you should see this on your screen in a second. Bing. And I also want to show you a whole bunch of labs tonight so you get a really good sense of how all this stuff works. So, I think there's two huge sweeping categories of things that we want to look at. One is people who feel poorly, people who are sick in some way and want to feel better. That's 99% of my practice. People have serious health problems, mild health problems, some kind of health problem. And so they schedule, we run ion panels, we run all kinds of fancy stool testing, and we figure out what's wrong, we fix it. But there's another use for functional medicine, which is probably 1% of my practice, and that's as a wellness concept, right? To do the labs before there's a problem and to find the underpinnings for chronic health problems before they develop. So, for example, looking for cancer markers before you develop cancer, looking for heart disease markers before you have your first heart attack, looking for inflammatory markers before you develop an autoimmune disease, looking for neurotransmitter markers before you're severely depressed or anxious. Very few people use functional medicine this way. I don't know why. It's it's sad, but I just want to throw it out there. So for those of you that are not feeling well, of course you can use these labs to get better. But for those of you that are feeling well, you can order, $1,000 worth of labs once a year. You can spend whatever is appropriate for the supplements to fix the things that are wrong. And that's like a preventive health program at the highest level. And I've been talking with my teacher, Richard Lord, about this lately. And Richard's the man that wrote this book. This is the book in our industry, right? Laboratory evaluations in clinical, laboratory evaluations for integrative and functional medicine. And, Richard and I have been talking about this a lot for the last couple of years. Like, what can we do to get people to use this in a preventive way and rather than when it's too late? So I just want to throw that out there as an option for those of you that may have family members or whoever that is, who haven't gotten sick yet. It's a fine use of these tests. I want to talk about that tonight a little bit. Also talk about how these tests can reveal genetic issues, either that are triggering part of why you feel sick or don't feel good, or genetic issues that you could mitigate the damage of, right? You could treat these genetic issues before they start to express themselves. And so that's like one sweeping idea. Then the other thing I want to talk about too is chronic degenerative diseases, the kinds of things that kill us. So in the United States and most of the industrialized world, accidents aren't a big problem. You know, a lot of people get shot in the United States, but it's not like the #1 cause of death. So it's not crime, it's not accidents. It's no longer infections like it used to be back in the day when people would get infections before we had antibiotics and die, right? So most people now are dying from heart disease, cancer, um, complications of diabetes. Those are probably like the 3 big diseases that take people out. Autoimmunity is on the rise, depression is on the rise, you know, but I think still really cancer, heart disease, diabetes, maybe throw depression, neurological conditions, you know, in the mix there as well. And so there's a couple of things that we know for sure that, you know, help prevent the aging process and help prevent these chronic degenerative diseases that don't cost anything. Okay, so I'm starting off with this in case you don't have a lot of money. Calorie restriction, absolutely proven to help prevent aging and the death of your cells. Obviously, a healthy diet doesn't cost a lot to buy vegetables and beans, greens and beans, right? You want to eat like a vegan 70, 80% of the time. A little bit of animal protein is okay, but don't overdo it. Okay, so calorie restriction, healthy diet, maybe supplementation. Maybe you don't even have enough money for supplementation. Take that out. Meditation is free last time I checked, right? So and meditation has been shown by Elizabeth Blackburn, and she got a Nobel Prize for this discovery to lengthen our telomeres. The longer your telomeres are, the longer you're going to live, and meditation does that. So, you know, there's some ideas just to think about. And then again, if you're low budget, avoid excess calories, avoid sugar. Don't eat foods that are going to trigger inflammation. Try to minimize your exposure to environmental toxins. Half the battle there is just drinking enough water every day. And then make sure you don't smoke, or if you do smoke, you know, try to figure out how you're going to quit and all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of things that are within our control that are lifestyle factors that are, you know, really in a way at the essence of this work. And we're not going to talk about that all the time tonight. I just want to mention that in the beginning so you don't think that I'm ignoring that as a concept, because what I'm more interested in getting information out about now is some of the labs, because these labs are not so well known, and I think it's pretty cool stuff that you guys should all know about. Let's see here. So let me show you. Let's just look at a test real quick, and we'll just zip through one of these. And I've got maybe 10 tests that I pulled up that we can look at, so we can start to think through. And I've done several of these talks already, so some of these things I'm going to sort of breeze through as a review, and then I want to focus on some of the new and interesting things here as well. And again, think of this from 2 perspectives. Think of this as, you know, it could be that you're using these labs to reverse some major problem, right? And it also could be that you're using these labs to start to think through how you could prevent future problems from occurring in the first place. Okay, so those are the 2 big issues that we can kind of compare here. So right off the bat, we're looking at amino acid levels. I'm going to kind of skip through that because I want to show you some other stuff. This is an ion panel, by the way. It includes a blood draw and a urine sample. Cost $700 to $800 maximum price. Does all kinds of really important things. And what I want to focus on tonight were these markers here, which are the fat-soluble antioxidants. And I talk about how fats are damaged and how you can measure the damage to fat. This would be a really great way to see what your risk factor for cardiovascular disease is. Okay, and there's a couple other cardiovascular markers on here as well that are really basic, including this one right here, oxidative stress markers. These markers here also, this is a water-soluble antioxidant marker, looking at the aqueous portion of the cells, right, the watery portion of the cells, and 8-OHTG here, or 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine, is a direct measure of DNA damage. So when your body's making DNA, it has these little, they usually represent like a ladder that's twisted, and the rungs on the ladder, the steps on the ladder, are these bases, they call them, that pair together. One of those bases is called guanosine. And if guanosine gets screwed up and damaged, it'll show up on this test. So this test is literally measuring if your DNA is messed up or not. If your DNA is messed up and it starts to replicate, it's going to replicate abnormally, and that is basically going to lead to cancer, cardiovascular disease, all kinds of health problems, right? So this is a direct marker for is your DNA healthy or not. There's another DNA marker in here I'll show you in a minute too. Vitamin D is super important, but you can get that with your regular doctor. And then the omega-3 and omega-6 fats, talk a lot about these because these are really important for inflammation and also for obviously neurological issues. Your brain is largely made up of fat, and for cardiovascular related issues, as well as inflammatory issues. So those are super important. There's a bunch of other cool things that this measures, like your saturated and unsaturated fats and all that. That's kind of a little bit more peripheral. And then under the nutrient markers, we talk a lot about organic acids, but I want to focus most specifically here tonight on these markers here. One of them we already mentioned, which was 8-OHDG, but there's also this one here, para-hydroxyphenolactate. And that, again, is another marker for oxidative stress, for the water-soluble antioxidants like vitamin C, and it's a direct measure of DNA damage. So these two together here are both measuring is your DNA getting damaged or not. That's a really important thing to know. If your DNA is getting damaged, you should do something about it. If your DNA is not getting damaged, you should not do something about it. So for example, on this particular patient, the oxidative stress markers are right in the middle of the green zone. This person does not need large amounts of vitamin C or other water-soluble antioxidants. And in fact, if you gave this person large amounts of water-soluble antioxidants, it would knock these markers too low, which would be a negative, okay? You can take too many antioxidants, absolutely yes. And so like I said, I was thinking about today, because I always think about cars, because I like cars. And I think about humans and cars, human behavior and car behavior. Like imagine that you had, I don't know what kind of car you like. What's the kind of car that everyone kind of acknowledges is a good car? I don't know, a Toyota, yeah, or a Honda, something that just lasts forever, or a Lexus or Mercedes, whatever. Let's say it's a Honda, Toyota Camry. Let's say you bought a brand new Toyota Camry, and then the years are going by, and you're kind of worried about it, and you're thinking, I don't know, it's like 3 or 4 years. I should go get it checked. And you bring it into a mechanic, and the mechanic looks at you and says, I don't really want to look at your car, but just to start replacing stuff randomly, And you'd be like, well, I don't know. And then let's just replace the battery. And I don't even know if it needs it, but let's just do that. Or let's just replace the entire radiator and cooling system. I don't know. It seems like a good idea. It's going to wear out at some point, right? You wouldn't do that. No one would do that. You would say, fix the things that are breaking. You wouldn't replace things that are fine, right? So if you don't know your oxidative damage level and you take antioxidants, it's not only a waste of money, it's just a bad idea. And it's even, I don't know, dangerous is the right word, but it's potentially risky. It's not a good thing to do. You wouldn't just randomly start fixing things on your car thinking you know what you're doing without some kind of diagnostic workup. You would take it to your mechanic. The mechanic would say, oh, I'm going to not just look at your car, I'm going to check the computer readout. I'm going to look under the hood. I'm going to tell you your brake pads are really thin, so let's do the brake pads. You're like, okay, good, let's do the brake pads, right? You have to do some kind of an examination before you start fixing things. So don't just take supplements randomly because you can really screw yourself up. And that's one simple example of how people do that all the time. I'll show you another one if you want another one. I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm just trying to really, would you do that with your car? Would you just start replacing things that if you read a magazine article about cooling systems, would you just go out and replace the cooling system? No. So if you read an article about how great CoQ10 is, don't just start taking it. Okay, that's dumb. Test. Okay, so CoQ10, and I see these all the time. The lab comes back, and the CoQ10 is through the roof high. This drives me crazy. Okay, that's not a good thing. You want to be in a certain range for all these nutrients. More is not better. Now, if your CoQ10 levels test low, it is absolutely critical that you take it until you get your levels back up. Okay, not against supplementation, but we want to do this in a rational way that's going to benefit you and not get you into trouble. All right. Yeah, you guys should be able to see my screen. Some people can't. I'm assuming you can see my screen with the lab on it. If you cannot see the screen, raise your hand. Don't raise my hand. And Donna's having trouble seeing it, but it probably is her computer. And Donna, if you only see me talking, you can minimize the box that has the camera, or just turn the camera part off, and then you can see the part that I'm showing. It should be hidden behind there, okay? All right, so let's get another lab. I see this stuff all day long, you guys. You just don't want to really mess with your health. You don't want to screw this one up. You only get one body, right? So let's find another good one here. And what? Oh, there's a good one. Wow, look at that. Okay. So let's should go back up and see what this part is like. All right, so homocysteine on this person is high. Homocysteine is a marker for cardiovascular disease, inflammation in the body, right? You can see all these minerals here are low. Low potassium, low magnesium, low calcium. Whew. Don't even know what to think about that, right? So you can think magnesium is important for your heart, for energy production. Calcium is important for your bones, for your brain, for, potassium is important for everything. So these are really, really important nutrients that if you're low in, you're going to have anything from muscle cramping to cognitive problems. So you just want to keep that in mind. So now here's a good example of where someone's actually low in an antioxidant. So again, these are the fat-soluble antioxidants. And what does that mean? That means that they have an affinity for fat. They hang out around the fatty tissues of the body. And that boils down to two super important things. And I have some diagrams on this. I'll show you. So the fat-soluble antioxidants are a little different than the water-soluble ones, okay? So the fat-soluble ones are going to protect your cell membranes, and they're going to protect your lipoproteins. If you've ever had your cholesterol checked, they looked at LDL, okay, that's a lipoprotein. So if your fat-soluble antioxidants are low, you're going to have damage to those LDLs, which puts you at great risk for cardiovascular disease. If your fat-soluble antioxidants are low, you're going to have damage to your cell membranes, which means that they're not going to work well. You have all kinds of problems in the brain and hormone systems and all that. Okay, so fat-soluble antioxidants protect your fat from damage. And I'll show you here. There's another, I'm going to skip around a little bit. Here we go. So if your fat-soluble antioxidants are damaged, you're going to have problems with cell membranes and lipoproteins, the fat tissues of the body. If your water-soluble antioxidant levels are low, you're going to have direct damage to your DNA, okay? Because the way your cells are set up, it's like a sac is like a water balloon, and inside the cell is a nucleus, if you remember high school biology. And then inside the nucleus is your DNA. And that's in a watery cytosol kind of solution thing, right? So it's not fat. And water-soluble antioxidants protect your DNA. Fat-soluble antioxidants protect your cell membranes and your lipids. And then all the antioxidants are combined to help protect your mitochondria. And there's some other stuff called glutathione, which is really important for all of this, but also super important for your mitochondria. So if you're thinking about cancer, you're thinking about damage to your DNA. You're thinking about heart disease, cardiovascular problems. You're thinking about damage to your lipids or your fats. If you're thinking about low energy, depression, pain, chronic pain syndromes, think about your mitochondria. Okay, and the way that these structures get damaged is from oxidative stress, right? So if you have a lot of oxidative stress, it's a bad thing. It's a lot of free radicals zipping around. And if you have a lot of oxidative stress, tissues are going to get damaged. And so we have, ideally, in the body, CoQ10 to prevent oxidative stress. We have gamma tocopherol. It's a fancy name for vitamin E. We have beta carotene. These are the fat-soluble antioxidants that are designed to protect you. And with a lab like we're looking at here, this person would greatly benefit from CoQ10, vitamin E, and beta carotene. In fact, I would say if this person doesn't take those nutrients, they're at high risk for developing some major problems with their brain or their heart. You want to kick these numbers up to the middle range. Usually that takes like 6 to 12 months. Okay. However, as I showed you in one of the earlier examples, if your fat-soluble antioxidants are fine, you're really not supposed to take them. It's not going to make things better to take more. It's not a more is better situation. And just because some magazine articles say CoQ10 is great doesn't mean you need it, right? And let me show you here. Then the water-soluble antioxidants, we mentioned earlier. Here they are. These are the ones that protect your DNA, parahydroxyphenolactate, and 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine. So these are the opposite. When these are high, it means, when these markers are high, it means there's a lot of DNA damage and you need antioxidant protection from water-soluble antioxidants, okay? So there, and you can use very high dosages of vitamin C in people like this to knock these numbers down. And look at this person. So the cutoff here for being elevated, it's hard to see that on the screen maybe, but it's 0.39. So anything above 0.3 is considered a problem. This person is at a 1.3. So they're quite elevated. That person desperately needs vitamin C to help protect their DNA. Now, what are the other things that can happen when you have a lot of oxidative damage? Well, you could have joint pain, you could get depressed, you could have inability to exercise. Lots of things can happen symptom-wise, in addition to the development of chronic illnesses, right? So just something to think about. And another thing on the labs is that once you see the status of the fat-soluble antioxidants, there's another test that's on this ion panel. It's profound. It'd be worth $700 just to do this one portion of the test. Lipid peroxides. Lipid, it means fat. Peroxides, it means are the lipids getting oxidized or damaged. If lipid peroxides are high, it means your lipids or fats are being damaged. Okay, and that is something you really want to know for your brain to help prevent anything from Parkinson's to Alzheimer's to memory loss to whatever that could happen with your brain, depression, to protect the fats in your brain and your brain tissue itself, to protect your LDLs, to protect your cardiovascular tissue, right? So these are really, really important things that you should just know. And we're just talking about it, not really joking, but just, it's like having a frustrated conversation with Dr. Lord about this on Monday. Like, this is medicine. This isn't alternative medicine. This is just basic human physiology. That's it, okay? This is not, health food store kind of stuff. This is just like how the body's supposed to work. And if we could all kind of reorient ourselves and start to focus on this kind of healthcare, then it would be a whole different world. This is my friend. Take a little commercial break for the spiritual life here. How's that? So this is my friend Ajahn Andako. So you guys, Chandako, when you guys may have heard this story before, but when I was in my early 20s, my father died very suddenly, and I was just like, screw it, I'm leaving. And so I sold all my stuff. I got rid of everything and literally just was down to a backpack. And I hopped on a jet plane and I went to a monastery in Thailand. And I lived in this monastery in Thailand for 2 years. And one of my buddies in the monastery was another young American guy named Jim. And Jim and I spent a long time studying Buddhism and working in the monastery together. And then when it came to the end of the 2-year mark, Jim decided to go up to the north of Thailand and ordain as a monk after all those years of living with the monks. And I met this young French woman and decided to run off and go to Koh Samui and hit the beaches and drink some beer and stuff. So we parted ways, and 25 years later, we reconnected, which is, I saw a poster, it's a true story, I saw a poster at a yoga studio in San Francisco 25 years later, and it was like, Ajahn Chandako is coming, and I thought, who's that? And I realized it was my old buddy Jim. And so I went to this this gathering of Buddhist monks in Golden Gate Park, and sure enough, there's Jim, bald as ever and looking great, and 25 years as a monk, now probably about 30 years as a monk. Just a wonderful man and inspiration for all of us. I meditate 2 to 4 hours a day. That ain't beans, okay? This Ajahn Chandako, this is his whole life. He just basically meditates 24 hours a day. So just one other kind of factoid here, though. Buddhist monks, and Jim and I did this for years in the monastery, only eat 1 meal a day. Okay, that's right back to this whole intermittent fasting thing that's so popular right now. So a lot of these ideas are old. They've been around for thousands of years, and we're just sort of rediscovering the obvious here. All right, so let's go back to a couple of labs. We talked a lot about fat-soluble antioxidants because they're really important. Here's another example. This person is low in alpha tocopherol. That's another fancy name for a different form of vitamin E. And this person is a little bit high in vitamin A. Whoops, taking too much vitamin A and not taking enough vitamin E. Okay, and let's see what their other markers look like. Their 8-OHDG marker is normal. That's the DNA marker, DNA damage marker. But then we get into the fatty acids, and you can see a pretty big problem. Wow, look at this. This is amazing. These are all real patients of mine too from the last maybe year. Alpha ALA is low. That's found in flaxseed. And then these three markers here, number 2, 3, and 4, are the markers for the omega-3 fish oils. You can see 2 of the 3 here are low. And then the omega-6s are also low. So this person has problems across the board with essential fatty acids. So now we want to tie this all together, right? The essential fatty acids are really important. If you are low in omega-3, you should take it. If you're low in omega-6, you should take them until you get your levels back up. And one of the tricks of the trade here is that if your essential fatty acid levels are low and you start to take them, remember, what you're taking is these concentrated fats and these fish oil pills, right? And you have to make sure that they don't get damaged or oxidized. And what are the compounds that help protect your fats? We've been talking about them for the whole half hour, these fat-soluble antioxidants. So if your fat-soluble antioxidants are low and you take a bunch of fish oil, it's going to go badly because those omega-3s that you're taking are going to get oxidized or damaged. So you have to coordinate programs here. In this case, take the omega-3s and 6s with the fat-soluble antioxidants, but not vitamin A. It's a little tricky, you can see. It's not any different than when you take your car in, right? The last time I took my car in, oh my gosh, this is a good story. It's a true story too. So my son and I, okay, I'll go back all the way. So when my son turned 16, there is a momentary lapse of all rational parenting, and he wanted to get a 1964 Thunderbird. And I always liked T-Birds myself. And I've been divorced from his mom for a long time, but I called his mom up and I'm like, hey, Sophie, Asa and I really are thinking about getting a 64 T-Bird. And in any other normal conversation, she would have said no. But for some reason, she just said yes. I still to this day don't know why she said that was an okay idea. But she says yes. So he and I ran out and we bought a 1964 T-Bird. And this thing had this whole souped up engine, and it was like the worst car you could get for a 16-year-old, bar none, right? And so when we first brought that car in to get it repaired, to get it checked out, make sure it was safe, the brakes had just been shredded because the person that had owned it before had driven it fast a lot, right? And so if I had let him drive around that car, it like almost literally, it really wouldn't stop, right? Like you would hit the brakes pretty hard and you had to wait a while till the physical stopping process happened. So that would have been really bad, even worse than just buying him the 64 T-Bird. So we got it analyzed, we got it diagnosed, we took it to a professional, they figured it out, right? And it turned out that someone had installed the wrong kind of brakes on it when they upgraded it. They actually put the wrong kind of brake. It had to be redone. But anyways, the point is that this stuff is a little bit complicated. Like I wouldn't have figured out the right brakes for a 64 T-Bird. I didn't know that someone else had put the wrong brakes on. Clearly, the previous owner before me didn't know that they were installing the wrong kind of brakes, right? So part of the reason why they weren't working. So there's a little bit of complexity to this whole thing. And you don't want to go out and spend hundreds of dollars a month on supplements without having a pretty good idea of what you're going to do, okay, and why you're doing it. Now this person has these other low fats as well. And I want to show you this. So let's look at one or two more other patterns. Okay. Let's see. I loaded up. I know I saw one that was low. Let me find it here. Got so many windows open here. Oh, here we go. Let's try this one. Yeah. So there's another pattern that can happen. And I'll show you here. Actually, I've got a better one in mind. Hang on a second. Because I want to talk a little bit about the genetic underpinnings. So way back in the 1950s, there's a man named Roger Williams. And let's go and look at Roger. If you haven't read this book, this is a must read, absolute must read. Here we go. Roger Williams, if you haven't heard of this book, it's Biochemical Individuality. Here it is. Now you got to remember, this is in the 1950s. And I've read this book several times. So you can get it for 14 bucks. Okay, it's old. It's been around for a long time. So what Roger Williams was talking about, he's a PhD at the University of Texas, Austin. in the 1950s, 1960s. And what he was talking about was how each person has a completely different genetic fingerprint, a genetic expression. And each person has very different nutrient requirements. And these guys that were part of Roger Williams' group and the study groups and the doctors that were working with this stuff in the 50s and 60s were working with schizophrenic patients, manic depressives, and really serious cognitive, mental health problems were being solved by using these various B vitamin treatments with the understanding that different people have different genetic needs. This is way decades, generations before we even conceptualized of being able to map out the genome, right, and actually see all these genes, which we can see now. This is really, really far ahead of its time kind of stuff. And the key point is that when Dr. Lord set up these tests that we look at now, he had in mind making these labs a screening tool for genetic disorders that were not otherwise picked up by regular medical testing for people when they were in childhood, right? So when babies are born in any industrialized country, there's certain genetic tests that are run to make sure they don't have diseases like PKU and whatnot that can be, really damaging to newborn babies. And we now, with the advent of all the genetic testing techniques that are available now, can look at this stuff in a lot more detail. However, there's on these tests that we look at in classes like tonight, there's actually let me find one of these here. There are actually ways that you can see the genetic expression showing in a functional manner. It's what Dr. Lord calls functional genomics. Okay, and I'm going to show you some examples of that and how profound this can be. This goes right back 1950s and 1960s, except for, most people aren't aware that we have the technology now to actually test for these things. I might have to do a fake one. So I was trying to find a real one here. Hang on. Oh, I think it's in here. Yeah, but it's in here. Okay. I want to show you a real test so that's not something fake. I think I've got it right here. Sorry for the delay. So each person has to produce something like 20,000 proteins just to keep ourselves alive. And each one of those proteins requires all kinds of enzymatic processes for it to assemble it and disassemble it and move things around. It's pretty complicated what's happening in our bodies on a regular basis, right? And none of this stuff is perfect. There's, potential errors that can happen all over the place. And I want to show you with these tests how you can start to detect genetic disorders. This is pretty profound. And the way that they do these things, hang on, let's find. Oh, I'm sorry, I should have found this one earlier. I thought I had it loaded, but I didn't. All right, I'm going to check. Give me one more second. Let's see here. Well, I'm just going to have to pretend because I didn't pull up the right one. Oh, here we go. Ha, got it. Sorry, I have too many files open. Here we go. This is it. So each one of these markers that we're looking at elevates in response to a nutrient deficiency. We're going to look at a certain section of the testing now. So these markers go high when you're missing a certain vitamin, mineral, or whatnot. Okay. And here, let's look at an example here where you'll see these ranges that are the normal ranges that have been established for the average person who's healthy. And then you can see where some of these patients are at, and you'll see what I mean in terms of the extraordinary, obvious genetic issues. So here's a great example right here. Let's pull it up. And some of these numbers can get to be absolutely insane. Here we go. And well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to draw it because I'm going to spend too much time trying to figure this out. So let me just draw it on here for you. So I'll show you. I just take a typical one that I just know from the past. So here you have a reference range. Let's say for a B vitamin, a lot of you may have heard of folate. Folate is really popular these days, right? And a lot of people feel like they have folate problems, MTHFR, and they want to take tetrahydromethylfolate and all this kind of stuff. And they have this gene, that shows that they have a problem processing folate. But here we have a functional version of a folate test, okay? And let me show you here. So formiminoglutamate, this is usually called FIGLU, is a marker for folate levels. And it's a functional marker, meaning it's telling you, do you have enough folate in your system or not? It's not telling you if you have the genetic problem or not. It's telling you whether you have an expression of that genetic problem or not. So in other words, when Dr. Lord was setting this test up, this is 35 years ago, they didn't have genetic testing like we do now. He wanted to know the functional ramifications, just like Roger Williams did, right? They wanted to know not do you have a gene for something, but is that gene expressing or not? And so when you look at these ranges here, you see in the far right-hand column, the range for folate or FIGLU is 2.2. So anything between a 1 and a 2.2 shows you have a folate deficiency. Okay? That could be dietary, we don't really know. But if you have a folate, let's say that's a 6, and it's 3 times the reference range marker here, that is going to be clearly a genetic issue. So in other words, when these numbers get high enough, they no longer become possible to be nutrient deficiencies, and you're looking at a genetic disorder that's being expressed. So the beauty of these tests is that you can use them to see if there's a nutrient deficiency. That would be somebody who has a folate marker right here. You can also use them to determine if there's a genetic issue or not. That would be someone who has a folate that's like double or more the either double the reference range or more than double the reference range. And then you can see that for all these different markers, right? So you can see that for xanthurinate, which is a marker for B6. Is there a genetic issue with B6, which is pretty common? And so on and so on. Now I'll show you another example of, this just happened with one of my patients this past week. And this was actually pretty interesting. I'm pretty sad, but pretty happy at the same time. This is her lab. Okay, so this is a young woman, mid-20s, and she has, I would say, primarily depression and anxiety. Those are the two biggest problems. Okay, and so we did this test. We've been testing her for maybe 3 or 4 years. But we did this test, this more complex test that we're looking at right now, about a year and a half ago. And it turned out that she was low in omega-3 and some, but not all of the omega-6s, right? You can see the GLA here is actually high. So she was taking too much GLA, but she was low in these other omegas, okay? And so obviously we took her off the GLA and we put her on the omega-3s and the 6s that she was missing. And her mood stabilized in like 2-3 months completely. And the problem that she'd had since childhood was pretty much gone. And then she stopped taking the supplements for a few months, and the problem started to come back. And there are some people that have genetic flaws in their ability to process these omega fatty acids, right? So in a perfect world, these issues that we show are diet related, and we clean up the diet, we supplement for 6 months or a year, the problems go away. In other situations, like with the B vitamins or with these essential fats, some people just need these nutrients on an ongoing basis for very long periods of time. Okay, can be potentially for the rest of your life. If you have a genetic flaw and you don't make enough, or you don't process folate properly, you're probably just going to need to take folate forever. That's not really like the goal of all this, is to get people on supplement programs forever. But if there's a few key nutrients that your body just doesn't process well, it just makes sense to keep things on an even keel. And then another way that you can use the labs is to get on a supplement, like let's say this example here, get on CoQ10, vitamin E, and beta carotene for 6 to 12 months, stop taking them for a few weeks, and your levels should come up to the normal range. Okay. And if that's not happening, and you're constantly having to take these, and we're constantly seeing that the levels are dropping back, there could be a genetic flaw in your system, and you will learn over the course of a year or two of doing these labs, what are the markers that are going to keep showing up because you just don't process these well. Now, sometimes there's other ancillary issues, like for example, person might not digest well, so you might have a chronic need for fatty acids because you have fat malabsorption, you don't absorb fat fat-related nutrients well, in which case we do gut testing. And there's other variations on the theme here. It's not always the case that there's genetic issues, but you really want to know what the genetic issues are so you can address them directly and not wait around until something catastrophic happens that you could have avoided. All right, here. Let's see. I want to see if there's any questions. You guys can type in questions into the little typing box thing there. There's one question here from Lori. The numbers that are used are based on healthy males or females or both in age range. So it's men and women, adults. I don't know this for sure, but I think adult means over 18 and under 70, but I'm not totally sure. But I know they exclude young people. I know they exclude older people. I don't know exactly what the cutoffs are, but they try to get people in the middle. And then for children who do these labs, there's ways that you can adjust the ranges so that you can match with, basically it's based on the body weight of the child, and you can figure that out. And then will your office email out a link? Yeah, so we always send out an email link, and you're welcome to share that with other people. Let them know about this. Hopefully it helps spread the word here. And let me see. Let me make sure that I don't have any other questions here before we rush off. Okay, so let me make sure I'm going to cover these things. Oh, relative versus absolute nutritional deficiencies. Okay, so let me answer that one first. So this is actually super important. So this is hard to explain. So let me show you I think it's easy to see this with the brain. So you can have, let me show you the brain markers here. All right, here, this is a good one. So you can have a marker like this patient does. Homovanillate is low. That means that this person is very low in dopamine, okay? And that means that this person, if they take tyrosine, will feel like their entire life just changed. I have done that thousands of times with patients. It's pretty amazing. It almost always works. If this marker is low and you're low in dopamine and you start to take tyrosine, your whole life will totally change. Do you just want to rush out and take tyrosine? No, because your levels might be normal already, in which case it's not going to help. And in fact, it could probably hurt by throwing off other brain chemicals. So don't rush out and buy a bunch of tyrosine. You need to do the test to really figure this out, okay? Does that sound crazy? Think about the car mechanic. Would you just go to your car mechanic and say, hey, I heard this webinar and I think I should get my radiator changed? No, they would check it. They would do some diagnostic workup. You know how you take your car in and they always give you that first bill. They're like, okay, it was $90 for us to diagnose what was wrong. And you think, couldn't you have just fixed it? But no, they have to look at it first. You have to diagnose. So this is the most important step, is you diagnose it first, right? So now you could have someone, for example, so that's a relative, that's an absolute nutritional deficiency. This person is just low in tyrosine, and so their brain is not working well, okay? It's just like if you're really thirsty right now and you drink a glass of water, now you're not thirsty anymore. So a relative nutritional deficiency is different. A relative nutritional deficiency is something you have to think through a little more in a more complex way. So let me show you an example of that. Let's say for example, I hope this isn't too complicated. I don't think it is. Somebody asked the question, so you guys are thinking about it. Okay, let's use the omega-3s. So let's say that you're low in omega-3s, like this person is, all right? And let's say I'm like Dr. Dan, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna give you omega-3s. It's gonna change your life. Now I'm thinking, okay, well, wait a minute. How is this person's fat soluble antioxidants, right? Because we want to make sure the omega-3s are well protected. And let's pretend that the fat soluble antioxidants are perfect, okay? So they're low in omega-3s, but the fat-soluble antioxidants are perfect. So then I'm thinking, I'm going to give them a bunch of these omega-3s. They're going to have more of these fatty acids. Should I give maybe a little bit of the fat-soluble antioxidants just to kind of anticipate that they're going to need a little bit more, right? So that would be something along the lines of a relative nutritional deficiency. It's relative to some other dynamic that you're trying to shift. Okay, so absolute means that the levels are low, you want to bring them up. Relative means that you're, this is another example, an easy one is with the brain. So let me show you here. Let me get my brain slides out real quick. This is one that shows up a lot. So let's say you have a neurotoxin problem. Bummer. Let's say, I'll show you how this manifests on the labs. Oh, how convenient, this person has that problem. Okay, so let's say that your detox, here we have detox markers, toxicants and detoxification. Orotate, glucarate, high. That's bad. When those are high, it means that there is a lot of ammonia. In terms of orotate, there's ammonia building up. That doesn't sound good, right? Ammonia hits your brain, not a good thing. There's problems with phase 1, phase 2 detox with glucarate. So these markers are high, means you have a high level of environmental toxins in your body, in your tissues, right? And one of the first things that those nasty little toxins are going to do is they're going to damage brain cells. So your brain cells aren't going to, conduct signals as effectively because they're screwed up, right, by some kind of environmental toxin in this patient's case. So I'll show you here again. This is another example of a relative nutritional deficiency. Relative to what, right? Sorry, my computer's getting upset because I don't know why it's getting upset. My computer's getting upset because it just has its own personal opinions about things, and we're learning how to live together. There we go. Okay. So when that happens, here we go. We'll show you, this is a bundle of neurons. It's like a bunch of wires, but this is how your brain works, right? There's a whole bundle of neurons together. So in a normally functioning brain, let's say you have 1,000 units of neurotransmitters coming in, and you have 1,000 units coming out, right? So your brain's working beautifully. Everything's functioning normally. If you have damage to the neurons, there's some damage from some kind of a neurotoxin, you can have, it's like stepping on a hose. It's like when you get a kink in a garden hose, it's not flowing as well. You can have 1,000 units of, let's say, dopamine coming into this system, but you're really only getting 500 responses, right? So half of that dopamine is just not doing anything because there's structural damage to the brain. So another way of looking at relative nutritional deficiencies is in a person like this with environmental toxins that have damaged their brain, they might need to take tyrosine and double the amount that a typical person would just to get normal firing. Okay, so absolute nutrient deficiencies are like what we saw in the very beginning of the class, where we saw low magnesium, low potassium. It's a no-brainer. You take magnesium, you take potassium, you're going to feel like your life has changed, right? Here, this person. This is an absolute deficiency. Magnesium is low. You take a boat ton of magnesium for 6 to 12 months. You get this into the normal range, your life will feel completely different. That's an absolute deficiency. The relative deficiencies are when it's a little more complex and it's relative to some other variable that you have to take into account. All right, and let me see, there's one or two more questions here. Then we're gonna wrap it up. Sorry, let me see where to go. Oh, here's a question. Are you saying that the performance of phase 2 liver detox directly affects brain neurotransmitters? Not always. So sometimes if the liver detox pathways are not working well, you could have a problem clearing hormones and have a problem with your female hormones. You could have a problem with neurotoxins building up and damaging the brain. You could have a problem with toxins causing inflammation and hitting or damaging your DNA. You can have these environmental toxins hitting or damaging your mitochondria. So if they damage your mitochondria, you get tired. If they damage your DNA, you're high risk for cancer. If they damage your brain, you get depressed and anxious. If the same toxin buildup and poor liver detoxification makes it so that you can't break down your estrogen really well, your estrogen can build up and you get all kinds of hormonal symptoms. So that's where there's some variation here, is where you have one major organ system like the liver that fails in terms of detoxification, it can, have ramifications all throughout the body. I wouldn't say that's the fun part of this job, but that's the interesting part of this job, is just how for each one of us do these, failures manifest. Check this person out. This is just random and interesting though. Magnesium low? Okay. That is going to impact sleep, energy, muscle cramping, PMS kind of stuff, all that. But look, this person is low in copper. How random is that? And they're low in selenium. Like, would you just walk outside one day and think, I feel like I'm low in copper? Probably not. And it's a really, really important mineral. It is responsible for helping red blood cells carry oxygen around, right? But you definitely don't want to take copper randomly. You can become toxic in copper. It can be very dangerous. You definitely don't want to take copper unless you need it. But it's just one of those random things. Like, how would you even conceptualize that you needed that? It's just so wild. All right, let me make sure again that I got all the questions here. If you have a last minute question, go for it. Here, let's see. Otherwise, I think I covered everything. Yeah, I think we're good. Okay, so we'll keep doing more of these. I hope they're helpful and you can start to learn more about how your body works and how the labs work. And if you have any interest in becoming a patient, call the office to get signed up. We do work with people on the phone all over the world. I'm always happy to work with new people. And most of the time, if you can afford it, we would be doing these ion panels. There's some less expensive testing if you really don't have the budget for it. But I'm trying to do ion panels as much as I can with new patients these days. The testing is around $700 to $800. If you want to do additional testing, it can be a little bit more. But the basic ion panel itself is about the price of a set of new tires on a fancy car. All right, take care, everyone. We'll catch up with you soon. Bye for now.